In Dune, they do mention he who controls the spice controls the universe. And our next storyteller will tell us what happens when you don't control the spice. Please welcome Kara Peters.
It's production day, and I am making my fire cider at the Western Mass Food Processing Center. Fire cider is made on 2 different days. One day to chop up all of the ingredients and add to the apple cider vinegar, and then another day to press out those raw ingredients in bottle that infused vinegar. To ensure that all my batches are equal, we follow what's called a production sheet, which is basically my fire cider recipe with all sorts of other details like how fine to chop the onions and when to test the pH. On this day, as usual, the crew and I were filling 4 55-gallon barrels with equal amounts of every ingredient. The lovely local ginger, turmeric, onions, and garlic were being chopped up and weighed and added to each of the barrels. We were bracing ourselves for the processing of the horseradish. For those of you who know what that's like, you know that one sniff goes right to your brain, and crying is your only option. This is why chopping up 85 pounds of horseradish today was a job we gave to the rookie in the kitchen. I was on spice detail. My job was to weigh out the rosemary, the black pepper, and the jalapeno powder, and add it to each of the 4 barrels. When I got to the jalapeno, I weighed out 3 pounds and added that to barrel number 1 on top of all of those other delicious ingredients. And then I weighed out another 3 pounds and added that to barrel number 2, and then 3. When I got to barrel number 4, I didn't have quite enough. I was just a little short. That's weird. I know we had plenty for the production, more than enough. I stood there in my confusion, looking down at that production sheet, and my stomach sank. I had been looking at the amount needed for the whole batch. 3 pounds for 4 barrels. I was not looking at the amount needed per barrel. And then I felt the blood drain from my face. I had added 4 times the amount of jalapeno needed for this batch. What was I going to do? This was a $10,000 mistake that I could not afford to make. I needed product now, and I did not have time to wait for another batch. And I did have plans to make an extra spicy fire cider, but not this way, not by adding more jalapeno. I stood there in my terror, feeling so alone, just looking around at everybody so busily continuing to work on my fire cider. For those of you who don't know, fire cider is a traditional health tonic made by infusing apple cider vinegar with all sorts of healthful ingredients. It's great for whatever ails you, common cold, inflammation, gut health, etc. It's also delicious to use in your recipes like salad dressings, marinades, and even cocktails. I started making fire cider for my family a long time ago using ingredients from my own garden. And then in May of 22, I got my wholesale license and started my business, Albin's Homemade. Now, I get my ingredients from mostly from our local farms. Turmeric and ginger from Old Friends Farm in Amherst. I get my honey from Shelburne Honey, just to name a couple. And I produce at the Western Mass Food Processing Center, which is a program of Franklin County Community Development Corporation in Greenfield. They work with all sorts of food entrepreneurs all over New England and local farmers to help them create the products that they want. And they've been with me since the beginning, every step of the way. I would proudly wear their t-shirt that says, "The team that processes your dream." We had been starting to really get to know each other by now in the kitchen at the processing center. I actually felt like I belonged in that kitchen. There's a lot that goes into each production, a lot that I have to do, like order all the ingredients and have them delivered on time. And there's so much that they have to do to prep for the production as well. So there was trust, and I was about to ruin that trust. All new businesses make mistakes, right? It's part of the learning process. Another mistake I had made early on was I approved a proof of my labels without the barcode. And there was nothing I could do after ordering 6,000 of these labels. I couldn't use those in the stores that my fire cider was being sold. That was a $1,500 mistake that only affected me. This was a $10,000 mistake that also affected the team at the processing center. And I don't like disappointing others. I was afraid that this mistake would make me seem incompetent and illegit to run this business. And I certainly did not want to lose the trust that I had gained. So, once I regained my breath, after realizing this big mistake I had just made, I found Jason, the production supervisor, and I sheepishly told him what had happened. I saw the blood drain from his face too, and then he immediately joked, "Well, I guess you just made your extra spicy fire cider." Jason and I knew we had to go tell Liz, the boss. Liz is the director of operations at the processing center. This means she oversees everything that happens there. She's been with me from the beginning, every step of the way, and she's amazing, but she's a little bit intimidating. You have no idea how scared I was to go into her office to tell her what had happened. I did not want to disappoint Liz. But Jason and I walked into her office, told her what happened, and then I had to tell everybody else who was coming into the office to see what was going on. Everybody had the same reaction: silence, a thoughtful nod, and then extra spicy? But then the brainstorming really began. Jason, Liz, Evan, who is the warehouse and packaging supervisor, and I brainstormed our options. What were we going to do? It became evident right away that we weren't going to throw away this mess that I had just made. We were going to find a solution. Ultimately, we decided to do a huge batch of 12 more barrels without the jalapeno, and add that to the extra spicy that we had just made, and I'd have a shitload of fire cider. So that's what we did. I ordered more ingredients to be delivered to do this huge batch next week. The processing center even ordered a couple more barrels to accommodate this extra large batch that we were doing. And we made more fire cider. This time, I was not on spice detail. I wasn't sure if I'd ever be allowed back into the kitchen again. In the long run, it really did work out. I had enough fire cider to last me for the whole year. I learned that I can do bigger batches than I was doing before, which means less productions throughout the year, which is less expensive for my business. I learned that if I make another mistake, whether I'm alone or in a team, that I can always call upon my community to help me figure out a solution. So for those of you who purchase my fire cider at a farmer's market that I do, or in one of the many stores that it's in, like River Valley, Greenfields Market in Greenfield, Cornucopia in Northampton, if you purchase a bottle that has a best buy date of January 2027, you're tasting this successful batch. So 1 year later, we did go back into production. This was just this past December, and I was allowed back into the kitchen, and I did go back on spice detail.